Space and Scientism.
He was considered basically the greatest rocket scientist of all time. He basically founded NASA, he created NASA, yet he's got very sinister, satanic, occult links with Aleister Crowley.
There are always moments where science enters areas of the occult, and then also where science does something very supernatural in that. I think a scientist may have weird belief systems or not, but they manage to separate it from the evidence. So Parsons was able to be very schizophrenic. Obviously, when he worked at JPL, he didn't talk about building Satan.
Yeah.
You know, or having strange sexual escapades, you know, on the planet Jupiter or whatever, or on the moon or whatever.
Basically, Jack Parsons was born in 1914, 100 years ago, and he grew up in Pasadena, outside Los Angeles. Basically, from a young age, was very interested in firing rockets in his back garden. His grandfather helped him to do so. And that's what he did from a young age on the science side. And from an occult angle, he describes trying to summon the devil, or trying to conjure the devil up in his bedroom at the age of 13, and being successful, and being so terrified that he never dabbled in the occult again until he was 18 or 19 years old.
The separation between science and occultism is a fairly modern thing. In the Renaissance, science and occultism were very closely related. Adam Weishaupt, the founder of the Illuminati, is another person in that tradition, and Aleister Crowley is another. He was Parsons' major teacher.
He saw rocketry and magic, he saw them as different sides of the same coin. I mean, both were kind of roundly disparaged by everybody. In his view, rocketry was so crazy an idea at the time that it really wasn't that far from magic. And so kind of Parsons really helped kind of invent the science in his backyard. And basically he was self-taught. He didn't go to university. He and a friend called Ed Foreman built rockets. They started with cardboard tubes. They ended up using piping and all sorts of other stuff. And they just ended up experimenting with rockets. They were big fans of science fiction at the time, and rockets were all the rage in science fiction, even if they weren't in the science of the day. In fact, at the time, nobody took rockets or rocketry as a science seriously. Parsons founded the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and then the science of rocketry became a kind of proper science. You know, lots of universities started teaching it, the government got involved, and while beforehand Parsons had been seen as kind of an eccentric who had this, you know, this occult, you know, home life, really, which he was involved in, everybody thought that was fine until it became a real big corporate military-industrial concern. And he was kind of erased out of the whole foundation of rocketry in America. I mean, if you look in the big textbooks, you rarely find any mention of him at all.
You get into the Apollo missions in the 60s, they supposedly went 240,000 miles away to the moon. And yet since then, 2016, 2017, the furthest that man has been in space is 400 miles. 400 miles. I don't know if you heard that correctly, 400 miles. They said in the 60s they went 240,000 miles. Again, there's something going on here.
Is he ready to go into space with a new G.I. Joe astronaut capsule and spacesuit? Silver uniform, space helmet, communications cord. The realistic capsule has simulated retro rockets. Sliding canopy, control panel too. And the capsule floats so recoveries can be made. There's even a phonograph record of an actual flight.
Okay, well, we have the opportunity to set the record straight. We're asking you to...
I'm not on the record right now.
We'd ask you to...
Would you please go away?
Well, asking you to swear in the Bible that you orbited the moon.
Would you please go away?
Well, if you really orbited the moon, why won't you swear in the Bible that you did so? Being halfway to the moon. And they refer to you on the tape as a shot that was done during Apollo 10, where you put a transparency over the window and moved the camera of the Earth and moved the camera back away from the window, turned off the lights in the spacecraft, and appeared to be halfway to the moon when in fact they were in Earth orbit.
Huh, really?
Yeah, and they said it was the same way that you did it on Apollo 10. So we wanted to give you the opportunity to put your left hand on the Bible, to raise your right hand, to swear to God.
Stick it in your ear.
Well, You were giving an opportunity to swear to God under oath that you walked on the moon.
I don't do that kind of thing.
Well, if you really walked on the moon, what's the problem with swearing to God that you did? If you really walked on the moon, why would you not do that? So why don't you just put the end to the record in the argument and put your hand on the Bible, swear to God you walked on the moon.
Mr. Seibel, knowing you, that's probably a fake Bible.
Really? Well, no, it's a real Bible. You have the opportunity to have $5,000.
The meeting is not open.
Well, you have $5,000 cash. You can give it to charity if you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon.
Please
I have
give
a
it to
tape.
charity. It'd be fine.
Why don't you swear to, why not? Why won't you do it? So why don't you put your hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon?
Mr. Seibel has made a fool of himself in front of the world. Mr. Seibel, you do not deserve answers.
I understand that some believe that we should attempt a return to the surface of the moon first, as previously planned. But I just have to say, pretty bluntly here, we've been there before.
We know that they're lying to us about the millions of years. We know they're lying to us about evolution. We know they're lying to us about the Big Bang. All this stuff. You know, if they're lying to us about all that, then what else? What else are they lying to us about? Right? Are they lying to us about the actual Earth that we live on? Are they lying to us about space? Are they lying to us about the sun, the moon, the stars? Where does it end? Well, the lies don't end, because Satan is still very real. He's our adversary. His job is to lie to people. His main function is to lie. And so he's going to lie about everything. He lies to us about our identity. He lies to us about God's identity. He lies to us about the creation. Lies to us about everything.
Is as the space program came along and people got more and more into cosmology and how does this whole thing work with the planets going around and how many different solar systems are out there and that how many galaxies and different things like that, and this whole idea that stars are out there that are suns just like our sun that are supposedly just as big if not bigger. We're supposed to have this medium star. Notice how everything we have is medium. We're on a medium planet, on a medium star, in a medium-sized galaxy, and they just go to stress that there's nothing extraordinary about the Earth or anything connected to the Earth.
God creating the sun, the moon, and the stars specifically talks about how the sun, the moon, and the stars were created on the fourth day. The earth was already created. What was the earth orbiting around before the sun was even created? See, understand that scientism, no matter how much you want to cling to science, you're going to have a hard time if you're going to look at the literal meaning of Genesis or of creation. So again, if you start looking into how God says that creation happened, how he created the world, understand that he doesn't lie. Scientism has lied to us. They have an agenda.
Through doing experiments and really observing the world instead of sitting in front of the Cosmos series and anything about the universe and the world that you see on the TV, and actually going outside myself at night and just looking at the world myself, I started to realize, wait a second, I think what the Bible is describing is exactly what I'm seeing, and I don't think what we're being shown is the truth.
Everything that you have starts out with the word of man, right? But are you going to believe the word of man that was inspired by God and is actually available to us? We can read it and we can test it. We can see. We can read it and see what it says and then look at reality and wow, it works.
What is the difference? Billions of years evolving? Or the stars billions of light years away? Do you believe in billions, or do you believe in the Bible? How they have moved science in the realm of all truth and understanding when it's been masqueraded as scientism all along.
On numerous occasions, NASA admits that we can't go beyond low Earth orbit, which is between 99 miles and 1,200 miles away. The interesting thing is that the moon is said to be 238,000 miles away, which is a difference of 236,800 miles.
Right now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go. And this new system that we're building is going to allow us to go beyond and hopefully take humans into the solar system to explore. So the moon, Mars, asteroids, there's a lot of destinations that we could go to, and we're building these building block components in order to allow us to do that eventually.
Now, one thing I really want your generation to embrace is that the Earth is a closed system. We cannot leave the Earth. There's no place to go.
We are headed 3,600 miles above Earth, 15 times higher from the planet than the International Space Station. As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation. Radiation like this could harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. Naturally, we have to pass through this danger zone twice, once up and once back. But Orion has protection. Shielding will be put to the test as the vehicle cuts through the waves of radiation. Sensors aboard will record radiation levels for scientists to study. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. For this flight, it's time to head home.
How early do we indoctrinate our children into the whole heliocentric model? I mean, from an early age, even as babies, in the crib, looking up at the solar system. Some of the earliest thoughts, some of the earliest memories. It's interesting. If you actually think about how early children, babies, see our world, we teach them this big round ball and say, this is where we are. Into kindergarten, into grade 1, into grade 2, through classrooms. The globe is on every desk, as you see pictures everywhere in movies. It's kind of a staple. It's something that is to be expected. But if in our research we understand that NASA has lied, modern day science has lied, the global elite have lied, they've led us to believe in these lies.
We look out in the universe and 85% of all the gravity that's out there has some mysterious unknown source. We add up all the stars, the galaxies, the planets, the comets, the black holes, the dark clouds, everything out there that we can see, touch, smell, or taste. And it doesn't add up to give us the gravity that we see operating in this universe.
And dark matter is a great example. It was through observation of galaxies. I mean, there are things, celestial objects that we call galaxies that look like clusters of spinning stars. And the whole theory of dark matter, there's so much in the news about dark matter and dark energy. And let's go back to where dark matter came from. The whole idea of dark matter came from the idea that galaxies spin too fast. They spin so quickly that the observable matter, which is based on light, the light that we can see from the galaxies, that there isn't enough mass there, that they're spinning so fast that they should fly apart based on the conservation of angular momentum. So we've made this assumption that there's more mass there that we can't see, and that's what dark matter is. That's where it comes from. It's based on that assumption that we see these things out there in space that are very, very far away, and that they're spinning so fast and there's all this mass there that it defies the basic laws of physics here on Earth. And so besides the idea that might not even be true, that those things might not be that far away, we're forcing things in the night sky to have to comply with our physics here on Earth. Now that in itself is an enormous assumption, but besides that, dark matter comes from that assumption. So we just build assumptions upon assumptions. And then dark energy, the other one that is supposed to make up an enormous amount of our universe, this dark energy comes from assuming that the law of gravity is true, because gravity says that all masses attract all other masses. But we have this infinitely expanding space. Everything's moving away from each other, but supposedly some calculations were done, I think in the 70s, that showed that long ago, since the Big Bang, they assumed Big Bang happened, that all of the masses should have started pulling each other back together, that all of these galaxies and everything should be coming back together into one big mass. But calculations have shown that that's not true, or the theory is that there's this dark energy that's pushing all of the galaxies apart. So it's counteracting this assumed force of gravity. So now we assume that there's another force that's pushing them all apart. And not only that, is galaxies appear to be disks, whereas gravity would want to make things spherical, or make things, orbit in a spherical type state. So the dark energy is not only pushing all of these galaxies away from each other and arranging them in weird ways that doesn't really seem to make sense, it's also flattening galaxies into disks to give them the shape. So we have this mysterious force called dark energy. That's where these theories come from. They're based on assumptions, and it's really, like I said, it's kind of a house of cards.
It amazes me that as believers, we're able to just so quickly throw away the inerrant, God-breathed, divinely dictated, inspired word of God himself. We're just so quick to throw that away or re-explain it or twist it, all because of a picture that we get from NASA.
And one thing I started, I used to always read Google News when I was a young engineer, and I'd go down to the science and technology section of the Google News page, and they would say, scientists have discovered this, scientists have discovered that, and I'd read a lot of the articles, and a lot of times it wouldn't say who. And so I started, I didn't realize it, but at the time I started imagining men in lab coats just figuring these things out, and it's who are these people? And now I look at this, and when I see this stuff now, that scientists have a new theory on what is it, semi-radial tachyons or something I saw recently about how those are some new particles they're finding, and I see these men in these white lab coats, and I kind of laugh to myself, who are these people? They're never really described to us, and it's just all these theories, all these crazy things that just come up in the news about science this and science that, and don't get me wrong, I love science, but scientists, it's like they're priests almost, and it's getting out of hand. We really got to just take a step back. Wait a second here. We're in dreamland here. There's a book I'm reading by a man named Lee Smolin who's a theoretical physicist, just saying, whoa, we got to back up and get back to testable, scientific method physics, and it doesn't seem like mainstream science wants to go that route. It really seems like they want to keep all of this theoretical stuff that really, to me, is just kicking the can down the road, avoiding the question, who made this? Just add more and more time, more and more billions of years, more and more expanding infiniteness that has no explanation, no beginning, no real beginning at least.
Are you sure that everything that you've been taught is true? Are we spinning at 1,000 miles per hour at the equator? Whipping through space around the sun? What about evolution? Are you sure we evolved from apes over billions of years? The entire Big Bang cosmology exists in billions of miles away and billions of years ago. Are you going to put your faith in billions? Or are you going to put your faith in the Bible? Make sure. You need to understand. Wake up. Make sure that this is true. Ask questions. Seek the truth. We're told that the sun is 93 million miles away from the Earth. We're also told the sun and the moon appear to be the same size in the sky. The explanation is that the diameter of the sun is almost 400 times the size of the diameter of the moon. The distance of the moon to the sun is 400 times greater. Therefore, this is coincidence. There is never coincidence, and this is what we want to investigate.
According to a recent study conducted by the National Science Foundation, 1 in 4 Americans believes that the sun and everything else in space revolves around the Earth. and not, as modern science says, the other way around. Believing in what's called geocentrism is really pretty stupid right now, given that Galileo, Copernicus, and Kepler debunked it over 500 years ago.
We are told that the Earth spins at 1,040 miles per hour, while the Earth travels around the Sun at 66,000 miles per hour. Meanwhile, the whole solar system is going inside the Milky Way galaxy at a speed of 490,000 miles per hour. And finally, the entire Milky Way galaxy is darting through infinite space at over 1 million miles per hour. Most people believe this, and yet every experiment ever conducted to prove even the simple spin of the Earth has failed.
You know, science is supposed to be point A, B, C, and D. You come up with a hypothesis. You then come up with a way to test that hypothesis, and hopefully it's a repeatable method that you can get the same results. And you can then verify if your hypothesis is true or false. And science has actually done this with several different things. Airy's failure, Sagnac, Michelson-Morley, Michelson-Gale experiments, many different things, and even today, gyroscopes. They all show through the scientific method that the Earth does not move. It absolutely does not move. It is ether, what they call the ether, and the stars, everything around us, which is moving around us. We are stationary. Everything we see in the sky revolves around the Earth.
In 1887, Albert Michelson and Edward Morley conducted what's known as the Michelson-Morley experiment. This experiment was attempting to prove the speculated motion of the Earth around the Sun, and when it failed, Albert Einstein was forced to form the theory of relativity to overcome this problem. In fact, anytime mainstream science is faced with undesirable results, they create a workaround, which isn't real science at all.
Challenging outer space and the cosmos, we have all these pictures of this stuff that people will believe are real, and so it's too big of a conspiracy, a lot of people think. But in my opinion, I think we've just underestimated the power of Satan, and we're warned about this, the deceiver and deception, and I think it's something we really need to step back and say, hey, I think how powerful is this deceiver? Is it possible that the deception could be this big?
NASA, the science community, the top elite are preparing us for something. The great deception is coming to our world. Without the evolutionary theory, aliens would not exist. The scientific community, talking about other life, discovering planets, the entire Big Bang universe is a hoax. The entire Big Bang universe they have constructed is to enslave us into the great deception that's coming into this world. The great deception has been planned for years.
I couldn't help at one point in my discussions privately with General Secretary Gorbachev, when you stop to think that we're all God's children wherever we may live in the world, I couldn't help but say to him, just think how easy his task and mine might be in these meetings that we held if suddenly there was a threat to this world from some other species from another planet outside in the universe. We'd forget all the little local differences that we have between our countries, and we would find out once and for all that we really are all human beings here on this earth together. Well, I don't suppose we can wait for some alien race to come down and threaten us, but I think that between us we can bring about that realization.
And we've been hearing a lot lately about dozens of other habitable planets being discovered. And today, NASA is hosting a discussion panel about these habitable planets that are just a short, 10, 20 or so light years away from us. So RT correspondent Megan Lopez joined us earlier from NASA, and I first asked her if we were close to finding another life form in our solar system.
Do aliens even exist, and how would we know?
Well, the Kepler satellite currently orbiting in outer space has identified about 50
50 planets that seem very much Earth-like. In fact, every week we discover another Jupiter-sized planet in outer space.
They need to figure out what type of activity that is. But with the organic materials, it means that we could find a footprint of Martian life that used to exist. And if there's plant life that used to exist, it could mean that there's other life that used to exist. So scientists at NASA are very excited. They just unveiled this, and it presents a new puzzle to sort of solve for them.
Where did we come from? Who created us? The notion becomes even more alarming when you understand that more and more people are looking to the alien theory as planting us in our DNA at some other time in the universe. Even Dawkins proposes this.
Well, then who did create the heavens and the earth?
Why do you use the word who? You see, you immediately beg the question by using the word who.
Well, then how did it get created?
Well, by a very slow process.
Well, how did it start?
Nobody knows how it started. We know the kind of event that it must have been. We know the sort of event that must have happened for the origin of life.
And what was that?
It was the origin of the first self-replicating molecule.
Right, and how did that happen?
I told you we don't know.
So you have no idea how it started?
No, nor has anybody.
Nor has anyone else. What do you think is the possibility that intelligent design might turn out to be the answer to some issues in genetics or in evolution?
It could come about in the following way. It could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means to a very, very high level of technology and designed a form of life that they seeded onto perhaps this planet. Now, that is a possibility and an intriguing possibility. And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the details of biochemistry, molecular biology. You might find a signature of some sort of designer.
Wait a second. Richard Dawkins thought intelligent design might be a legitimate pursuit?
And that designer could well be a higher intelligence from elsewhere in the universe. Well, but that higher intelligence would itself have had to have come about by some explicable or ultimately explicable process. It couldn't have just jumped into existence spontaneously. That's the point.
So Professor Dawkins was not against intelligent design, just certain types of designers, such as God.
We've backed ourselves so far into this corner of bowing to science and twisting the Bible to agree with science that we've handicapped ourselves in major ways, especially with what's coming down the pike and in terms of scientific discovery, in terms of alien life, in terms of extraterrestrial life. We have really handicapped ourselves in terms of those matters when aligning them with God's Word. And there are more than likely people out there right now that are twisting Scripture or looking for Scripture to twist to justify whatever NASA puts out, whatever announcement comes next.